Let us begin with a thought. A simple change in the currents of time. A single moment, altered forever. This is a story of what could have been. It is a journey into a world that took a different path. Now, I must say this very clearly. This is not a story you have heard before. It is not found in the pages of a comic book. It is not a game played on a screen. This is an exploration of the human spirit. It is a testament to our will to survive, to build, and to dream again, even when the world we knew has turned to dust and memory. Imagine a history where the tense standoff of the Cold War did not thaw. Picture a world where the missiles, once placed in Cuba and Turkey, were never removed. They remained like steel sentinels of a coming storm. The leaders of great nations, caught in a web of pride and fear, made choices that led not to peace, but to fire. The quiet prayers for diplomacy went unanswered. The brinkmanship continued, minute by minute, day by day, until the final terrible moment when a button was pushed. This is the story of the world that followed that fateful decision. This is not a tale of heroes in powered armor or villains with grand, evil plans. It is a story about ordinary people. It is about the farmers, the teachers, the mechanics, and the children who inherited a broken world. This is a look at what happens when everything is lost, and humanity is forced to start over from the very beginning. We will not focus on the grand battles or the political drama that led to the end. Instead, we will look at the quiet, powerful moments of rebirth that happened long after the noise of the old world faded away. The world we are about to explore is one of shadows and light. It is a world of great sorrow, but also of incredible, unshakable hope. We will journey across continents that have been reshaped by fire and time. We will meet the new tribes and the fledgling nations that are rising from the ashes. Forget the tales of endless wastelands and perpetual despair. We are here to witness the most powerful force in the universe. The instinct to live, to connect, and to build a future, no matter how bleak the past has been. It began with a blinding flash, not one, but thousands of them, painting the sky in colors no natural sunset could ever create. For a moment, it was beautiful, a silent, terrible aurora that wrapped around the globe. This was the moment the bombs went off. The arsenals built over decades were finally unleashed. The missiles flew across oceans and continents, carrying not messages of peace, but stars of pure destruction. Cities that had stood for centuries vanished in the blink of an eye. Paris, Moscow, Washington, Beijing, they became names whispered only in history. Places that existed only in the fading memories of the very few. The world did not end in a single explosive instant. It was a slower, more agonizing process. After the fire came the wind. Great, dark clouds of soot and ash rose into the atmosphere, so thick that they blocked out the sun. A long, cold twilight fell upon the earth. This was the nuclear winter. The temperatures plummeted. Snow fell in deserts and ice-covered lands that had always been warm. The plants withered. The animals starved. The very air became a poison, carrying invisible particles of radiation that settled on everything, silent and deadly. The old world's intricate systems collapsed immediately. The power grids failed, plunging the survivors into darkness. The networks that delivered food and water ceased to function. The internet, the great web of connection, was severed and lost. All the knowledge, the art, the music, the communication that had defined the 20th century simply stopped. There was no one to call for help. There was no help to be had. The world, once a bustling globe of 7 billion souls, fell into a profound and terrifying silence, broken only by the howling of the radioactive winds. What was left was a ruin, a ghost of a planet. The great monuments of human achievement were now twisted skeletons of steel and concrete. The lush forests were charred wastelands. The clear blue oceans were murky and grey, their shores littered with the debris of a shattered civilization. This was the canvas upon which a new story would be written, a world scoured clean by humanity's greatest folly, a desolate, dangerous and empty place, waiting for life to find a way to begin again. It seemed impossible, but life is a stubborn, resilient force. As the surface world burned and froze, a fraction of humanity survived. They were the fortunate few, or perhaps the cursed. They lived deep beneath the Earth's surface, in massive underground bunkers. These were complex, self-contained cities built for this very purpose. They had been designed by governments and wealthy individuals as arks, meant to preserve a piece of the old world. Here, shielded by meters of concrete and lead, thousands of people waited out the apocalypse. They had clean air, stored food, and the faint hum of machinery as their only companion. For generations, this was their entire universe. Life in the bunkers was one of strict routine and conservation. Every resource was precious. Water was recycled endlessly. Food was grown under artificial lights in vast hydroponic farms. The days were marked not by the sun and moon, but by the cycling of the bunker's internal clock. Children were born in these subterranean worlds who had never seen the sky. They learned about trees and oceans from books and old videos. The surface was a mythical place, a dangerous, forbidden land spoken of in hushed, fearful tones by the elders who still remembered it. The psychological toll was immense. Living without sunlight, without open spaces, changed people. A quiet melancholy settled over the bunker communities. Yet, they endured. They maintained the old knowledge, carefully preserving books and data drives. They taught their children science, history, and engineering, hoping that one day this knowledge could be used to rebuild. They formed new kinds of societies, governed by councils and engineers, where every person had a critical role to play in keeping the delicate systems of their metal world running smoothly. Their sole purpose was to survive until the day the Earth was habitable again. For nearly 100 years, they waited. The surface radiation levels were monitored constantly by robotic drones. The readings were slow to fall, a constant reminder of the poison that saturated the world above. The first generations who entered the bunkers grew old and passed away, taking their memories of blue skies with them. Their children and their children's children carried on, fueled by the stories and the dream of return. They were the keepers of the flame, a human seed bank, waiting patiently through the long, dark silence for the signal that it was finally safe to emerge. While some waited below, life on the surface did not completely cease. In the vast, broken landscapes of the Americas, pockets of humanity clung to existence. These were the ones left behind, the ones who found shelter in subway tunnels, deep caves, or remote valleys untouched by the worst of the fallout. They were the true survivors. They faced the poisoned world head-on, and, against all odds, they adapted. They learned to read the winds for signs of radiation. They learned which mutated plants were safe to eat, and which streams held clean water. They became the children of the dust. Over generations, these surface dwellers changed. The constant, low-level radiation in their environment subtly altered their biology. Some developed a heightened resistance to sickness. Others had senses that were sharper, able to see better in the dim light of the nuclear twilight. These were not grotesque monsters from fiction. They were simply humans, shaped by a harsh new world. They formed small, nomadic tribes, moving through the ruins of the old cities like ghosts. They scavenged for tools, technology, and scraps of knowledge left behind by the world that was. New civilizations began to form, built from the rubble. In the deserts of what was once the American Southwest, tribes learned to harness the relentless sun with salvaged solar panels, creating small, fortified oases of light and life. Along the Mississippi River, which had cleansed itself over the decades, new fishing communities arose, using handmade rafts to trade goods between settlements. They were not rebuilding the old world. They were creating something entirely new, a patchwork of cultures born from necessity and resilience. They had no memory of the world before the fire, only the stories passed down through generations. Among these new humans, there were whispers of others, beings who were more dramatically changed by the world's transformation. Some tribes spoke of the green-skinned, people living in the overgrown, radioactive forests of the Pacific Northwest, who seemed to have a strange connection with the mutated plants. Others told tales of the Shimmers, beings in the high mountains who could seemingly endure the coldest temperatures without fire or shelter. These were not aliens or demons, but branches of the human family, diverging and adapting in isolation, creating a new and diverse tapestry of life across the continent. As decades turned into a century, the scattered tribes and settlements began to coalesce. The instinct to organize, to form larger communities for safety and prosperity, was as strong as ever. In the Americas, a powerful new nation began to rise in the fertile plains of the Midwest. They called themselves the Commonwealth of the Plow. They had rediscovered the principles of large-scale agriculture, using hardy, radiation-resistant seeds they had cultivated over generations. Their banner, a simple golden wheat stalk on a field of green, became a symbol of stability and food for many smaller tribes who joined them. On other continents, similar stories were unfolding. In what was once Europe, a collection of city-states emerged along the Mediterranean coast, where the climate was milder and the sea offered a source of food and a means of travel. They became a maritime league, their ships with patched sails and salvaged engines, trading goods from the ruins of Spain to the shores of Greece. They were not French or Italian or Spanish anymore. They were the Sea People, a new identity forged in the shared struggle of rebuilding along the coast of a forgotten sea. Even in the most devastated regions, new societies took root. In the vast, cold expanse of Eurasia, nomadic horse clans roamed the steppes. They were descended from survivors who had fled the burning cities, returning to an ancient way of life. They were masters of survival in the harsh, windswept plains. They herded mutated, hardy livestock and lived in mobile yurts, following the seasons. Their nation was not one of land, but of people, a great, moving horde, bound by kinship and a fierce will to remain free under the wide, grey sky. These new nations were simpler than the ones that came before. Their governments were often councils of elders or elected leaders from different tribes. Their laws were based on common sense and survival. They had no ambition to conquer the world. Their primary goal was to protect their people and secure a future for their children. They were the first fragile governments of a new era. Their banners and their names are testament to the fact that even after the end of the world, humanity's need for society, for order, and for a shared identity could not be extinguished. Far from the blighted continents, another story of survival was taking place. Many remote islands in the vastness of the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans had been spared the direct impact of the bombs. They were just too small, too insignificant to have been targets. While fallout did reach them on the winds, it was far less concentrated than on the mainlands. These islands became sanctuaries, little pockets of green in a world that had turned to grey. Life there continued, changed but not broken. The old ways, fishing and farming, became honestly more important than ever. The people of these islands saw the world die from a distance. They saw the sky darken and felt the air grow cold. They watched as the ships and planes from the mainland stopped coming, leaving them utterly isolated. For a century, they were alone, believing they might be the only people left on Earth. They preserved what they could of their culture and the knowledge they had, waiting and watching the empty horizon. Their societies became even more close-knit, their survival dependent on community and cooperation. These islands became time capsules of a simpler way of life. Then one day, a ship appeared. It was not a sleek vessel from the old world, but a crude, patched-together boat, powered by sail and a sputtering salvaged engine. On board were explorers from one of the new coastal nations on the mainland. This first contact was a moment of profound revelation for both sides. The islanders learned they were not alone. The explorers discovered that the world was larger and more full of life than they had ever imagined. This encounter sparked a new age of discovery, as humble as the voyages of ancient mariners. These islands became vital hubs in the new world. They were sources of untainted seeds, clean water, and most importantly, knowledge of the sea. The islanders, who had never lost their connection to the oceans, taught the mainlanders how to build better ships and navigate by the stars. In return, the mainlanders brought tools and technologies scavenged from the ruins. A network of trade and communication began to form across the oceans, connecting the scattered fragments of humanity. The islands were no longer isolated outposts, but key stepping stones in the great project of weaving the world back together. The time of pure survival began to wane. The era of rebuilding had begun. It did not happen overnight. It happened brick by brick, field by field, connection by connection. The first priority was always food and water. The Commonwealth of the Plough in America shared its agricultural knowledge, and soon green patches of farmland began to appear in other parts of the world. Engineers, descended from the bunker dwellers who had now emerged, helped design and build new irrigation systems, using old world knowledge to solve new world problems. For the first time in generations, the threat of starvation began to recede for many. Next came the challenge of building new homes and cities. They did not try to replicate the sprawling metropolises of the past. Those were seen as monuments to a foolish and wasteful age. Instead, they built smaller, more sustainable towns. They used salvaged materials, steel beams from fallen skyscrapers, bricks from ruined buildings, but also natural materials like wood and stone. The architecture was practical and sturdy, designed to withstand the harsh climate. These new towns were often built around a central square, a place for markets and community gatherings, reflecting a renewed focus on people rather than profit. With stability came the rebirth of trade and industry. Blacksmiths, their forges glowing in the twilight, became some of the most respected members of society, turning scrap metal into essential tools, plows, and nails. Weavers used hardy, mutated plants to create warm, durable cloth. The new nations began to trade with one another, not for luxury goods, but for essentials. A caravan from the Commonwealth might trade 100 bushels of wheat to a coastal settlement for a shipment of salted fish and sturdy rope. This simple commerce slowly and steadily reconnected the disparate pockets of humanity. Perhaps most importantly, knowledge began to spread once more. The bunker dwellers, with their preserved libraries of data, were the keepers of the old world's science and history. They worked with the surface dwellers who had a century of practical knowledge about the new world's environment. Together, they began to create new schools. Children learned to read and write again. They learned the story of the Great Fire, not as a myth, but as a history lesson, a warning. They were taught the basics of engineering, medicine, and agriculture, armed with the tools to build a better world than the one their ancestors had destroyed. As societies grew more complex, a profound question began to emerge in the minds of the people. What are we now? They were not the people of the 21st century. Their world was fundamentally different. The old divisions of nationality, race, and religion that had fueled the Cold War seemed distant and meaningless. No one cared if your ancestors were from Russia or America when you were both working together to raise a wall against radioactive storms. New identities, forged in the crucible of survival, had taken their place. You were a child of the dust, a sea person, or a member of the Commonwealth. This new world was also more diverse in a biological sense. The children of the dust, the green-skinned, the shimmers, and the baseline humans who emerged from the bunkers now had to learn to live together. It was not always easy. Fear and suspicion were natural reactions to those who were different. Some communities preached purity and fear of the mutant. But the most successful and fastest-growing nations were those that embraced this new diversity. They understood that each group's unique adaptations were a strength, not a weakness. The old religions faded, replaced by new philosophies and spiritual beliefs that reflected their reality. Many worshipped the earth itself, seeing it as a powerful entity that had punished humanity for its arrogance and was now slowly healing. Others practiced a form of ancestor veneration, honoring the survivors who had carried them through the darkest times. Their morality was simple and direct. Cooperation is good, for it helps the community survive. Selfishness is bad, for it weakens the tribe. The primary virtue was resilience, the ability to endure, to adapt, and to keep going. This era of questioning was crucial. It was the moment humanity decided what its second chance would look like. Would they repeat the mistakes of the past? Would they fall back into patterns of greed, division, and warfare? Or could they build something different, something wiser? The memory of the Great Fire was a powerful deterrent. The ruins that dotted the landscape were a constant reminder of where the old path had led. In the councils of the new nations and in the quiet conversations around the fire, a consensus began to form. We must be better this time. And so, a new dawn begins to break. Not a literal dawn, the sun is still a pale disk in a hazy sky, but a dawn of the human spirit. The world is no longer just a wasteland, it is a garden, tended by scarred but hopeful hands. From the ashes of our greatest failure, new life is growing. The fledgling nations are becoming more confident. The trade routes are growing longer, weaving a new global tapestry of connection. The laughter of children learning to read echoes in towns built from the bones of the old world. It is a world reborn. There is still hardship. There is still danger. The scars on the planet are deep and will take thousands of years to fully heal. But there is no longer despair. There is purpose. The purpose is to build, to learn, and to ensure that the sky never burns again. The people of this new world look at the ruins of our time not with anger, but with a kind of sad wisdom. They see us as a lesson, a cautionary tale of a brilliant but reckless people who nearly destroyed everything. They are determined not to be us. The future is unwritten. Will the new nations live in peace? Will they one day reach for the stars, not with weapons, but with a unified sense of wonder? We cannot know. But we can see the foundation they have laid. It is a foundation built on community, not conquest. It is a foundation built on sustainability, not consumption. It is a foundation built on the understanding that all life is connected, from the bunker dweller to the child of the dust, from the smallest insect to the great wounded planet itself. This is the great unexpected outcome of our hypothetical disaster. The end of the world was not truly the end. It was a reset, a violent, painful, and tragic reset, but a reset nonetheless. It gave humanity a second chance, a chance to start over, to shed the baggage of its destructive past, and to finally learn to live in harmony with itself and its world. And in that possibility, in that fragile new beginning, we can find a powerful and enduring message of hope. Even after the darkest night, the sun, in its own time, will always rise again.